Hi, I'm Abby from Ratings.com, and today is a very special day. Christmas came early. We know you've all been asking for it, and today we have with us the Sony BRAVIA 9. As Sony's flagship model this year, it's their first non-OLED flagship since 2020's X950H. As good as the BRAVIA 9 is, it's also very expensive. So, is it worth its asking price? We're about to tell you, so sit back and grab some popcorn. This TV is available in 65, 75, and 85-inch sizes. We reviewed the 65-inch model, but our results also apply to the other sizes. Although the bigger sizes will have more local dimming zones, so we expect them to have better local dimming performance. The Sony BRAVIA 9 looks very premium, no doubt about it. It's framed by thin metallic bezels around the screen, giving the TV a very sleek look when viewed from the front. Even though it's rather thick, it does have a completely flat back, so it's able to be flush mounted against the wall using the VESA mounting points on the back, although a wall mount isn't included in the box. If you don't want to wall mount it, fret not. The BRAVIA 9 comes with a set of good quality metallic feet. They can be placed in 4 distinct positions. Horizontally, there is a narrow or a wide position, and vertically, they can be set high, lifting the TV about 3.7 inches from the table, or low, which gives you about 1.3 inches of clearance. No matter the size of your soundbar or TV stand, this TV will fit in just fine. Plus, the feet hold the TV very well, as it barely wobbles no matter how you have the feet set. For cable management, there are plastic covers to hide the cables coming out, and you can funnel them through either foot. The ports are on the far left if viewed from the front, making them easy to reach even if the TV is flush against the wall. There are 4 HDMI ports, though only ports 3 and 4 support HDMI 2.1 bandwidth for 4K at 120Hz signals. Sadly, port 3 is also the eARC port, which means you'll lose one of your 2.1 inputs if you connect the TV to a receiver or a soundbar. You could get an HDMI hub or a soundbar with full HDMI 2.1 pass-through. You could also perhaps forgo a soundbar entirely, but we'll get to the sound performance later. At least this TV can pass through all major audio formats from Dolby and DTS, which is great. And it also supports the popular Dolby Vision HDR format. Aside from that, the TV has 2 USB ports, including one USB 3.0 port, one digital optical audio out port, one IR port, and an ATSC 3.0 tuner for 4K over-the-air channels. The Sony BRAVIA 9 uses version 12 of the popular Google TV interface. The interface is smooth and easy to use, but sometimes settings get stuck, such as the brightness setting, and changing the values doesn't do anything. This is rare, however, and remember, we notice this because we're always changing settings while testing these TVs. An issue like this won't be nearly as annoying for most people and can be fixed easily by restarting the TV. You can also cast content from your phone using the built-in AirPlay 2 or Chromecast, or play videos directly from a USB stick. Oh, and in case you were wondering, this TV has ads, and you can't disable them. Shocking, we know. The remote is backlit and has a matte finish with blue speckles. How fancy. Outside of that, it has buttons for popular streaming services, and you can use the built-in microphone to switch inputs, change apps, search within apps, ask for the weather and time, and change settings like brightness. Time for what makes this QLED TV truly special, its image quality. This TV's contrast is outstanding. Seriously, it's so good that it approaches OLED territory. Blacks stay deep when bright highlights are also on screen, and it's just a treat to look at. Of course, this is true with local dimming set to high. With local dimming disabled, it doesn't look nearly as good. But you didn't purchase a TV this expensive to disable local dimming, right? Anyway, there isn't a reason to disable local dimming on this TV, as its blooming performance is stellar. There's only a tiny bit of blooming around bright objects and subtitles when they're displayed against a black background. It's very subtle, and it's barely noticeable with most content. It's more noticeable when you're looking at the TV from an angle, as there's some noticeable blooming that bleeds into the black bars of letterboxed movies during very bright scenes. Finally, there's considerable blooming across the entire screen if you open any settings menu, even when hitting the volume buttons on the remote. I know we sound negative here after praising the TV's blooming, but these instances of blooming are noticeable precisely due to how good the blooming is otherwise. In short, the TV's blooming performance is stellar, but it's not perfect. The TV uses a full array local dimming feature with 1512 dimming zones on the 65-inch model, and it's fantastic in action. Transitions are very hard to make out, the leading edge of bright and quick moving objects is a bit dimmer, and there's some minor haloing, but neither of these are noticeable with most real content. The BRAVIA 9 has incredible HDR brightness. When paired with its fantastic contrast, highlights really pop out during darker scenes. It's even bright enough that very bright specular highlights stand out in well-lit scenes. There's no doubt that the HDR viewing experience on this bad boy is impactful, to say the least. It dims a bit in game mode, but barely, and it's not noticeable in practice. Ultimately, no matter if you're gaming or watching movies in HDR, this TV is incredibly bright. And it's not just bright, it's also very accurate in HDR. It tracks the PQ EOTF curve incredibly close. Some shadows and midtones are slightly too dark, and some highlights are slightly too bright, but it's very minor and is very much nitpicking on our part. The TV is bright enough to display content mastered at 600 and 1000 nits, so no roll-off is necessary. With content mastered at 4000 nits, the gradual roll-off near the TV's maximum brightness helps to preserve details and specular highlights. The Sony BRAVIA 9 has an excellent HDR color gamut. Its coverage of the commonly used DCI-P3 color space is fantastic, and colors are mostly accurate, but highly saturated greens, yellows, and reds are a bit undersaturated. Its coverage of the wider Rec 2020 color space, which is mostly used in some nature documentaries and animated films to make them look extra colorful, is good, but all colors are undersaturated and/or off the mark, with greens, cyans, and blues faring the worst. To be fair, inaccuracies in the Rec 2020 space are common as the space is so wide. Still, we've seen better Rec 2020 performance in some recent TVs, including Sony's own X95L. Don't worry though, nature documentaries still look outstanding on this TV. Thankfully, it's one of the best TVs on the market when it comes to color volume. It displays a wide range of colors at high luminance levels, and dark saturated colors are displayed well due to its exceptional contrast. Do you tend to watch more shows in SDR than movies in HDR? Don't worry, in SDR the TV is also incredibly bright. It'll easily overcome any amount of light in a room unless your room is right in the middle of a super sunny beach in Mexico. And even then, it just might still be bright enough for a pleasant viewing experience. There is some variation in brightness with different content, but it's minimal and won't bother you unless you're extremely sensitive to it. Not only is it bright, but it also has no problem with bright reflections. Its glossy coating does an outstanding job at reducing the intensity of direct reflections, so don't worry about having this TV placed directly opposite a window. It can handle it. It also does a great job of reducing the intensity of indirect reflections, so rooms with bright ambient lighting are no problem for this TV. Unfortunately, there's noticeable rainbow smearing, which can bother some people. It's most noticeable in darker scenes with bright sources of light opposite the TV. The Sony BRAVIA 9 has excellent SDR pre-calibration accuracy. The color temperature is close to perfect, and Gamut is very close to our target of 2.2, although all scenes are displayed a bit brighter than intended. The white balance is very good, but blues and reds are a bit overrepresented in most shades of gray, although not enough to be noticeable by anyone except eagle-eyed purists. The color accuracy is fantastic, but whites are a bit inaccurate, again due to a slight overabundance of blues and reds. Fortunately, there are only very minor inaccuracies in some other colors. Even though the SDR color accuracy is excellent almost right out of the box, you can get it to near perfection with calibration. For a TV this expensive, it might just be worth the expense, but that's for you to decide. The Sony BRAVIA 9 has a mediocre viewing angle, although we've seen way worse viewing angles than this one on other LED models. The image looks mostly consistent from a slight angle, but there's gamma shifting, the black levels rise, and there's color washout that worsens the further you move off center. The image really degrades at an aggressive angle, especially starting at 46 degrees off angle, which is when the image noticeably suffers from brightness loss. So the TV isn't a very good choice for an ultra-wide seating arrangement. There is one disappointing thing worth noting. The TV has only decent gray uniformity. It's not bad by any means, but it's certainly worse than expected on a TV of this caliber. There's noticeable dirty screen effect towards the center of the screen, and the edges of the screen are darker than the middle. This can be noticed on some content with large areas of bright uniform colors. Think of a hockey game, for example, or when watching football. Its uniformity is excellent on a very dark or near black screen, but the edges are lighter than the center. That said, gray uniformity is unique to each individual panel, so it's possible that other units look better than ours, but they could also look like our panel, so it's something to note. Typically, Sony and image processing are a match made in heaven, and unsurprisingly, the same holds true for the BRAVIA 9. The Sony BRAVIA 9 has very impressive low-quality content smoothing. It does an excellent job at smoothing out artifacts and low bitrate content, such as from streaming apps, while still preserving details. Even more impressive is its upscaling performance. It really does an exceptional job with upscaling low-resolution content, like that from DVDs, standard definition cable channels, or low-resolution content from streaming apps. It won't make 480p content look like native 4K, but it's certainly a tremendous option if you want your low-resolution content to look the best it can on a modern 4K TV. The TV also has impressive HDR Native Gradient handling. There's noticeable banding and brighter blues, but even then, you'll only notice this if you're looking for it when playing content with gradual shades of blue. All other colors have minimal banding or no banding at all. The TV uses pulse width modulation to control the backlight intensity. With local dimming enabled, it flickers at 720 Hz in all picture modes, which is high enough that it isn't noticeable, but it can still bother those sensitive to flicker. With local dimming disabled, the TV flickers at 720 Hz with the brightness set to 34 or below. With the brightness set above 34, it has 720 Hz blips that are unnoticeable. The TV automatically removes Judder from all sources when watching movies or shows that are in 24p, even if they're in a 60 Hz signal, like from a cable box. Grab that controller, turn on your console, and settle down for some gaming. The Sony BRAVIA 9 has an excellent response time for minimal blur behind fast-moving objects. Unfortunately, and you've heard this from us before, the TV's response time is slower when coming out of dark states, so there's some black smearing and dark scene transitions. This is very common for LED TVs. Even the fastest ones don't perform quite as well in darker titles. On this TV, however, it's still fast enough that any black smearing won't be too distracting, even if it's there. This TV has incredibly low input lag when set to game mode, which ensures a very responsive gaming experience with very little delay between your actions with your controller or mouse and the action you see on screen. As usual for Sony, it's a bit higher than on competing models from LG and Samsung. Most people won't notice the higher input lag, but Sony TVs are not the best choice if your primary use case is gaming. The Sony BRAVIA 9 supports all common resolutions up to 4K at 120 Hz on 2 of its 4 HDMI ports. Chroma 444 signals are displayed properly with all supported resolutions when the TV's content type is set to game or PC, which is important for text clarity. Unfortunately, the TV doesn't support 1440p, as is usual for Sony TVs. If you want to game in 1440p, you can use your GPU's image scaling or upscaling technologies like DLSS or FSR to upscale a 1440p image to 4K instead of forcing a 1440p image, and it'll work fine. It supports almost everything from the current gen consoles except for 1440p. But that doesn't really matter, as you have no real reason to ever set any 4K at 120 Hz TV to 1440p on consoles. It also has auto low latency mode, so it automatically switches to game mode when it detects a console. And when connected to a PS5, the TV has a few unique features such as auto HDR tone mapping and auto genre picture mode, which is always a nice bonus for the PS5 gamers. On the Xbox, the TV supports Dolby Vision gaming at 4K at 120 Hz. How's this for a change of pace? The speakers on the BRAVIA 9 are so good, you might be able to go without a soundbar. Now, of course, that depends on what you want to do with your TV. If you want to host large movie-watching parties, then the thump and rumble of a dedicated soundbar will add to the experience, as this TV's speakers don't have much bass. But if you're a console gamer who is mostly using headphones, or you only have speakers on when you're watching some Netflix by yourself, the TV's stock speakers might just be good enough for you. They're well balanced, the dialogue is clear, and they get very loud, with distortion kept to a minimum, even at max volume. Alright. Should you buy this TV? If you're shopping at this price range, then you probably should. It's one of the most expensive TVs on the market, but it's also the best LED we've ever reviewed. You can get some of its performance from cheaper models like the Hisense U8N, but that would be like suggesting a Honda Civic to someone shopping for a Ferrari, so we won't do that. At this TV's price range, there are, however, some alternatives, namely the Hisense UX and the Sony A95L OLED. The Hisense UX isn't as good as the BRAVIA 9, although it's close, and it's only available in an 85-inch format. If you're shopping for that big of a TV though, then it's worth your consideration, as the UX is very close to the BRAVIA in terms of performance while also being significantly cheaper. The Hisense's contrast is even a bit better than the Sony's, although at the cost of more noticeable lighting zone transitions and blooming. The Hisense is also brighter than the Sony in HDR, with a wider color gamut, so overall it's capable of making content pop a bit more. It even has a wider viewing angle, as it's surprisingly good for an LED TV. Unfortunately, it loses out when it comes to image accuracy and image processing, so the Sony is by far the better choice for purists. But for everyone else, the UX is the better deal. When it comes to the Sony A95L versus the BRAVIA 9, then we're back to the old OLED versus LED debate. Typically, OLEDs win this outright, especially OLEDs that are as good as the A95L. But in this case, the BRAVIA 9 is so good that it's rather close. Ultimately, it comes down to one thing. Are you using the TV in a dark room or a bright room? The A95L doesn't get nearly as bright as the BRAVIA 9, but it does have better contrast due to its QD-OLED panel. That said, the BRAVIA 9 has truly fantastic contrast, so it's the more versatile of the two TVs. The BRAVIA looks amazing no matter the room conditions, while the A95L, being very bright, looks its best in dark rooms. Of course, the A95L also has that near-perfect viewing angle, a real boon to anyone who wishes to look at the TV from the sides or have their friends do so when hosting large parties. The A95L also has the edge for gamers due to its near instantaneous response time, which is amazing for gaming. Unfortunately, there's a caveat for gamers. The Sony A95L loses quite a bit of its brightness in game mode, which doesn't happen on the BRAVIA 9. But ultimately, it really is a dark room versus bright room debate. If you're hesitating, the BRAVIA 9 is the most versatile of the two. It truly is the best LED TV we've ever tested. Well, that's all for our review of the Sony BRAVIA 9. If you want a more detailed write-up on the TV, check out our written review. The link is in the description below. Until next time, I'm Abby from Ratings.com, where we help you find the best product for your needs. Don't worry though, nature documentaries still look documentaries.
Documentaries?
Nature documentaries.
Get it? It's a nature documentary? There's a dog in it?
It's got a dog in it.
I don't know.
It's got that dog in it.